Cybersecurity. It's going to be our first panel of the day, and it's entitled How Best to Prepare Your Business for the New Threats Posed by the Latest Technological Advancements. And I'm going to welcome the moderator to the stage, who is Pamela Gupta, CEO and co-president of Trusted AI and OutSecure Inc. company, AI Security Chair for the IEEE as well. So please welcome Pamela and her panelists to the stage.
Good morning. Can you hear me in the back? All right, it's great to see everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Pamela Gupta, and a quick question. How many of you were here yesterday? All right, great. How many times did you hear the word responsible AI or trustworthy AI through the day? Quite a few times. So it's my honor to delve into what are some of the ways we can deliver on what is trustworthy AI and what is responsible AI. Cybersecurity, as also was a word that you heard mentioned a lot, is a really complex area by itself. And when you combine it with a field such as artificial intelligence, the complexity goes up not as, it's not additional, it goes up algorithmically. It really goes, you can probably hear the passion in my voice, it goes up significantly. So how it relates to trustworthy AI or responsible AI, I would describe it as one of the 4 essential pillars of building trustworthy AI. To take a step back, my background has been in creating risk-based approaches for massive companies with really large operational models, Fortune 50s, global companies, who have a very complex operational environment as well as a regulatory environment. And the objective has always been how to enable the business, how to enable them to take more risks. 4 years ago, I took a look at the state of risk and cybersecurity in terms of building and implementing AI, realized that cybersecurity by itself is not enough to secure AI. So with that, I'd like to open this up to a brilliant panel which is composed of folks who are practicing and using AI and are very well versed, with cybersecurity concerns as it impacts business. And so the honor and privilege that I mentioned earlier is that we are going to go beyond what are the risks in how we can solve for them. So please give a hand for my panel. It is an extremely tough topic to handle, and I really appreciate you being here. Thank you. So let me start off with asking each one on the panel if you can just talk a little bit about what is your exposure to AI? What is the current field that you are wading in? I'll start with you.
Thank you for the introduction and the invitation. So I'm Michaël Chassé. I'm a practicing intensivist. In fact, I'm on service right now right across the street. Thanks for my colleague for covering for me. Healthcare is one of the main domain where we hope AI can make some massive breakthrough in the next hopefully a few years. And right now in the hospital, people are rushing to organize ourselves to collect all the data and put it in a way that it can be used for AI research, AI applications, and development. And I am the scientific director of the data center called the Center for Integration and Data Analysis at the CHUM, where we aim to collect as much data as we can and make it available for research and hopefully to improve operations and care of patients. So cybersecurity is a big concern in healthcare for obvious reasons. Yes, of course, cost, but one of the main topics we need to consider is privacy, confidentiality, and cybersecurity is the main threat for that. And if I can conclude my introduction, one of the main area of concerns in healthcare is how fragmented it is, how fragmented are the systems. We need to manage that. And we have a lot of humans behind it. And one of the main cybersecurity threat right now in the healthcare is probably the humans that manage all this fragmented system.
Thank you. We'll come back to that, Michaël. Thank you for sharing that. Mark?
Pamela, thank you, obviously, for being part of this panel and inviting us, and thank you for your time as well. So I'm Mark Fernandes. I'm the Global Chief Information Security Officer for CAE. And for those who are from Montreal have probably heard of CAE, but others you may not have heard of CAE. CAE is the industry standard in flight safety, and what we do is we have a pipeline effectively of core business that drives pilot training, safety, certification, and a bunch of other sort of workflow when it comes to flight safety. And many of you may have heard yesterday that there's going to be a wave of pilots that are retiring fairly soon. You probably saw it in the news, all over the news, which causes issues around everything from transportation to passenger logistics and a whole bunch of downstream things. So we believe that AI is very much part of our modernization of flight safety and the aviation space in general. You probably heard Abba talk about it, the digital officer talk about it yesterday. And we're getting ourselves organized around what it means to secure the entire digital value chain. So essentially how data comes in, how it's processed, how it's curated, and then what it's used for. And we're organizing around a principle called REST with double S. So what Pamela talked about is responsibility to our customers, our people, our enterprise, our community. E is explainable. We know how the data comes in, how it's used, what is the sample set, is there bias in the sample set. Safe, can it be used for the intended purposes and cannot be used for other purposes. Secure, I mean, that's what we're here for. And then trusted, and obviously this session's about trust. Thank you, Pamela, and more to talk about this.
Thank you, Mark. Megan?
Thank you. I'm Migan Megardichian, and thank you so much for having me on this panel. It's an honor to be on stage with such distinguished individuals. I'm a member of the TELUS Data and Trust Office. By profession, I'm a privacy lawyer, so I get visibility into the various projects that take place and evaluate them from a privacy and AI perspectives. Some of the ways that we use AI, we use it, for example, to improve customer experience. We use it to watch out for certain things in terms of network quality. We use it to enhance some of our products. So for example, in home security, instead of just using, let's say, motion detection, using computer vision, we are able to exclude things like a tree moving because of the wind or a bird flying by. And also AI for good. So for example, we use AI to improve the operations of the HVAC systems in our data centers to reduce our carbon footprint.
Wow, so this is a very eclectic group, right? So we're talking about medical data, we're talking about mission critical and operationally critical data for aviation, and I'm hearing some IoT in the HVAC systems and large scale systems. So we're going to keep it down to 2 questions, and after that I'm going to open it up to the audience. So please prepare your questions, and now you know which areas are involved. We'll have 5 minutes at the end. But to start off, the 2 questions that I want to talk about are, one is definitely going to be covering generative AI. What are the risks that you're seeing around? So we've heard the promise, right? And we want to attain that promise. The way we can attain that promise, and we saw this lovely, youthful individuals on the stage that Sarah introduced, and what they're hoping to achieve with generative AI, with AI. And then I want to talk about risks beyond generative AI, right? Because there are these fields that we have talked about and covered. So want to cover generative AI first, and then move on to the complexity of artificial intelligence in general. So let's just talk about. Hopefully, we can cover generative AI quickly, and then we can talk about some of the cybersecurity threats we are seeing to the business that you're coping with. So, Michaël, do you have anything that you are personally, your view on the risks that can affect your context, your business right now, your organization, when it comes to generative AI?
So my answer is it's not only related to generative AI, but in general, unfortunately, because right now what's happening is the technology is advancing very fast, way too fast for the healthcare system. So you have all these engineers and researchers in AI that come and say, the technology we have could be miraculous for healthcare. We have the solution for X, Y, and Z disease. And then I ask a question, fine, what does your model do? Is it safe? And then you have a silence. What do you mean? And that's where the discussion starts. And so the issue is not about generative AI and how to apply it. And the data is there, and the patients are there. And patients are very welcoming of these technologies and health practitioners. But the first question is, what does it do? Is it safe? How can I apply it in a medical context? And now, often when it's developed, it's not considered, or if it's considered, they don't. It's maybe in USA and then in Europe, and then they come in a different jurisdiction context, and we're not sure if it's applicable. So the main issue is we would need to. I know it's not a black box for the AI researcher there, but we need to carefully design these models so it can reassure the practitioners and the patient about what's in there and what's the real risk for the patients, if at all.
That's really a very important point, right? When we talk about trustworthy AI, we talk about responsible AI, there are multiple components to it. And the first starting one that we can easily agree on is risk-based, right? So if you're talking and you're asking your scientists or your machine learning developers, what are the risks? Is it security? Is it privacy? Is it transparency? Do you know what is the outcome going to be? These are really, really important questions to have because we all have stars in our eyes. We want that potential to hit that potential of AI, but to be implementing those guardrails on our own is where it's really going to come down to, I feel. Mark, let's see what you have.
So when I mentioned around the REST framework that we're using, the second tenet being explainable. And I don't think we've reached the point that it is explainable, Pamela, because I think generally everybody knows about ChatGPT and generative AI in general, and it's fascinating. But we don't know how the sample set is used. We don't know about the diversity of the sample set. We don't know how it's actually being processed from an algorithmic standpoint. What I will share with you is CAE has a rich ecosystem of suppliers and partners, as does TELUS and others around here. Our threat intelligence group was starting to explore risks with generative AI as soon as it came out. And we took a fairly confidential initiative with one of our partners, and for obvious reasons, I'm not going to mention who it is. And we asked ChatGPT what it knew about that initiative. And it came up with what we thought was a fairly accurate answer, and it actually gave us a blueprint of a document, which we didn't understand how it got. It wasn't CAE's, it was someone else's, and how it got there. So we haven't got to a fundamental point that we understand truly how the data comes in, how it's processed. So we've put a moratorium right now on use of generative AI until we can work with the technology ecosystem space to understand how it's used and how it comes in.
Thank you. And I have a couple of points, but I'm going to wait till Megan gets to talk about her perspective.
Sure, so I'll keep my answer brief. The truth is that phishing still remains the #1 cybersecurity threat. So with technologies like ChatGPT, it's very easy to create realistic phishing emails. I mean, it's no longer the Nigerian prince sending you cash, or you catching grammar errors or spelling errors. So from a practical sense, you would want to include, let's say ChatGPT generated phishing emails in your training. I'm sure if you're working in a large organization, you often get those fake phishing emails to see if you're catching onto them and keep you alert. So it's important to have that as part of your training.
Yeah, that is extremely important to point out that what Megan is talking about is it's not a one size, as casting a net which is generalized. It's casting a net which is extremely personalized, which is where this can be really dangerous and very hard to detect. One thing I do want to talk about ChatGPT before we move off the topic in the next 10 seconds is there are other risks that, from a cybersecurity perspective, that I want to mention. One is in the traditional cybersecurity space, one of the most abused threat is in what is called SQL injection, a threat vector and a vulnerability. With ChatGPT, there is and that you need expertise to develop an attack to compromise systems, let's say the database, deploy and implement SQL injection attacks. With ChatGPT, though, these large language models, not just ChatGPT, are subject to something called prompt injection attacks. And all you need is to know English language, for example, to actually start misleading the model and then basically obtaining the results that you want as a malefactor, as a mal player or a malactor, okay? So that is very significant for the cybersecurity space. And just one more, actually, is that very fact about even the data that is in ChatGPT. You got to be really careful what you're putting in. I'm not going to go into that Samsung debacle around privacy, but it is going to become a kind of a, do you want privacy or do you want security? Because you may not be able to achieve both if you have, so let me explain what I mean by that. When you choose to interact with ChatGPT, you may be using like a prompt, right? There's a prompt way of type in your question, you get a response. There's also an API that OpenAI publishes, where if you want to not store or have your data stored by OpenAI, you can use that API to get access to that large language model. And another one that they've released is plugins. And therein, as you can probably appreciate, API calls are one of the largest abuse factors for cybersecurity world, for application programming. So these are real risks. And I heard some of the students before talking about how they're using ChatGPT. You have to be have some caution in your mind what you're storing, where you're storing. Is it going to stay intellectually? Is that your intellectual property? And here's a catch. Is it the property of the LLM model provider? Because after all, if you're going into a back and forth, you're generating content which is neither yours nor theirs, so whose is it? So food for thought. Let's go to the next question, which is, are you, we talked about in our prep call a little bit about the NIST risk-based framework. NIST had come out with an AI risk management framework, the first of its kind. And the idea is to really make it streamline the process for companies who are developing AI, who are implementing it, who are using it, to identify the context, Michaël, as you mentioned. What is the context? What is the kind of data that you have? What are the models that you're developing? Where is the security going to come in? What are other factors that go into responsible and trustworthiness of the system? So, Michaël, the first question is, I would like to ask you if, in terms of the NIST RMF, are you familiar with that? Do you think that provides some, basically streamline the process for within your organization in creating trustworthy AI, trusted system, responsible system, And creating outcomes that you can trust, basically, I would go with.
My favorite answer is I don't know. Because, in biomedical research, right now, we even struggle with basic statistics to estimate correctly our outcomes, clinical outcomes. It's a problem in observational medical research to even know if the outcome we observe is really causal versus associative and so on. So then the question is, will it improve if you create your model in a more responsible way to better estimate your outcome, where we are not even there yet? We still struggle to even estimate the outcome. Right. So I think there's some more background work to do first. But it's definitely a good step, at least once you know what you estimate, to do it properly. But one of the main issue with all the way people build the models right now is that they assume that what they see is true, whereas in healthcare, even with basic statistics and RCTs and simple analysis, we're not even sure that what we observe is true.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thank you.
My turn? Pamela, with your permission, I'd like to maybe address the point that you raised before this about AI-led adversaries. I just want to say one quick thing, with your permission, obviously. For the people who are in cybersecurity here, we've built a capability that allows us to address with threats at the speed of human interpretation. We are typically a people-driven operational capability, most organizations. But adversaries on an increasing basis are starting to use automation and AI and deep learning. We've seen this. Before I joined CAE, we were working in the defense space, and we saw a state actor actually use what we believe to be AI to target the country we were working with. They were using COVID operations, smoke screens. They were distracting us to areas that they didn't want us to go. We're seeing a real big paradigm shift on offensive capability, targeting enterprise to move more towards AI. And we're not equipped. It's a dichotomy. Right? On this, just real quick, thanks to your prompt, I did actually go into it. And I thought it really shows how nascent the industry analysts and standards are in this space. It was very high level in general. We are actually at CA putting pressure on the technology vendor space to build better capability and robustness in AI. So a couple of things. The right to be forgotten. So for some reason, if our information gets onto things like ChatGPT, there should be an opportunity for us to take it out. We want API-driven transparency as a service, so we can see what sample set goes into it, how the algorithms work, so API-driven, and privacy-enhancing technologies like data summarization, sanitization, all those kinds of things. So I would say I'm not looking to NIST, we're not looking to NIST yet, but we are looking to our technology partners.
Great, thank you. And in terms of general AI, well, maybe that's not the right word because general AI has a different connotation. Beyond generative AI, your implementations and your cybersecurity threats you're seeing from emerging risk, can you talk a little bit about that, Mark?
Sorry, I didn't fully understand the question.
The cybersecurity threats to, so what comes with the terrain with AI, for example? We're collecting large amounts of data. We are processing. And the kicker is what you could separate out earlier as a development environment, for example, data scientists need access to production data. They need what you could separate out, in terms of risk. But now they have access to everything. So are you seeing anything along those lines?
Yeah, so we are actually looking at enclaving generative AI technology. Some of the technology vendor space do allow you to have enterprise versions of ChatGPT in this case, and for us to actually control the sample set that goes into that too, from a trust, integrity, validity, of all that kind of stuff. Right now, the public version is the Wild West, so to speak, right? The biggest thing that we think about is not just security implications, but ethical implications and cultural implications as well. Because, if you think about flight safety, for example, and what's the best way to train pilots in North America versus training them on high context cultures. So high context cultures like Japan, for example, The way they get trained is completely different. So we're actually looking at how we actually get a better indication of bias in the sample sets for that.
Okay.
And the only way we can do it right now is to use enterprise versions of ChatGPT.
And even aside from ChatGPT and generative AI, are you using, for example, emotive AI or emotional AI? You know, those would definitely be areas of where you would have to treat very carefully, right?
Yeah, I'll let Megan and Michelle talk about their
Sure.
capabilities. So right now, I would say we're precision-based in terms of AI. We don't have a broad strategy. We're tying it to use cases that really are mission-specific. They're tied to our core business sort of digital value chains. Right now, we are looking at a reinforcement learning mechanism. We are looking at generative AI and other types of automation, which doesn't really fall into AI type of capability, but they're all surrounding the flight safety experience.
Okay. And yeah, and the reason I mentioned emotive is because of the flight simulation. You might be reading the reactions, and that's something that's very going to be a concern or a factor. Megan, any thoughts on what are some of the other areas that you're seeing as a risk with this emerging technology, whether it's AI, even if it's other areas such as quantum?
Sure. So secure AI and privacy-enhanced AI are principles within the NIST framework, which is, again, it's not law, it's voluntary, it's a framework. As Mark said, it's high level. With respect to AI, I mean, chances are you're training these models in the cloud, you need the compute power. So what's special about AI is that now you're in cloud environments. And I think that often that gives a false sense of security. So it's this distinction between security of the cloud and security in the cloud. When you're setting up your cloud environments, or you're buying services from cloud providers, I'm talking, GCP, Google Cloud Platform, Azure, AWS, you're essentially buying a box from IKEA, right? It is your job to then put it together and to put it together properly. And if you can't do that, that's when perhaps you would bring in third parties who know how to do that well and securely. So it's important to keep that distinction in mind. And also, it's important to upskill the security professionals to learn about security in the cloud. Again, it's slightly a different ballgame. You should be familiar with the various services to help with, for example, enhancing privacy. And in a world where it's no longer about if you get hacked, it's when you get hacked, you're really thinking defensively, right? So it's about, okay, you've provisioned an environment, your data is in there. It's very easy to forget about it and abandon these environments. So it's that end-to-end life cycle of having that decommissioning piece part of your life cycle and literally on somebody's to-do list.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes left. I'd like to open up the questions to the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and there are people who can bring the mic to you. Just raise your hand, and we'll call you out. Yes, please go ahead. There's a gentleman here.
They may not have a mic.
Hello, thank you very much for the panel. I had a question for Michaël about if you have any intuition on how we can speed up the implementation cycle of new discoveries or technologies in the medical space. Because at the moment, that implementation cycle seems to be quite slow, because we first need to implement it into a curriculum, which is then taught to new clinicians, which eventually is then implemented after that whole education process. So I'm wondering if you have any intuition on how we can speed up that process.
Yes. Yes, sorry, the microphone was off. So what we're trying to achieve, not only here in Montreal, in Quebec, but in Canada, and I think all across the world, is really to create those bilingual folks who can care for a patient and understand the legal, ethical, and medical framework, as well as understand, at least when the engineers and the scientists speak, to try to connect. So there are several networks that are being built to help on that front. Second, the legal framework needs to change. Quebec will just pass Law 5 that will improve quite a bit data access and at least provide some guidelines on how to risk mitigate or at least risk manage data access, data sharing, data analysis, and so on in healthcare. And it's being done in Ontario, all across Canada, GPDR in Europe, and so on. So be very cognizant of this legal framework, because as soon as a company, a researcher comes in with no knowledge or limited knowledge of the legal framework, then we're stuck. Because then we have to go to do the whole legal assessment, privacy assessment, risk assessment, and it can take months. So I think that one part of the burden is not on the doctor and the nurse who is at the bedside trying to care for patient, and you have the 25 companies coming in and saying, hey, I want to try this, and let's go help me. Do your homework. So privacy, ethics, legal, cost, make our life simple, come in with a ready product, almost ready product, at least at that front, and then we can help translate. And the main challenge we have right now, and sorry, I repeat myself, is really people come in not ready. They have their model. I mean, some models I've seen, they require like 18 hours of pre-processing after having the CT scan. Do you really think I can pre-process a CT scan during 18 hours with no GPU and no computing power in the hospital? So this is the kind of things you need to think of.
Thank you. Is your question also about the sample set that you require to build your models? Is that also an indication? So how do you make sure you have enough diversity in your sample set, enough data efficacy? Is that also along the lines of your question as well?
But it's getting better and better on that front all across the country. So now we have the data, but people don't even know what it looks like. They're used to train their models with open data sets that are already clean and so on. So also part of the homework is how is the data generated, what it looks like, what kind of work is needed. The
population sample set, yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, we have two here.
Oh. There are two people here. I can't see too clearly, but if you can.
Hi.
Okay. Oh, all right. Thank you.
With your permission, I am actually broadcasting it live to Indian audience. There are a lot of people who are AI savvy, my audience. Some don't even know English. So my question is, how can you take all the advanced technology and artificial intelligence to a common man in a remote village in India?
Okay, I think that we can probably talk offline on that. The panel, we only have 45 seconds left, and I don't know if the panels are equipped to answer that as such, right? So if we have a question, let's talk offline. And one more question, we have 30 seconds. Okay.
Hello there.
All right, go ahead.
I'm George from Scott Logic. Just a quick question for Megan, please. So you mentioned on phishing emails and sort of the generation of, better emails. Are there going to be other type of generative data that might be used as like potential attack vectors, such as deep fakes and things like that? And if so, how do we combat that?
So, yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure if you could rephrase the question.
So if I understood it correctly, because I know we are at the dawn, they're asking about phishing is one attack vector. With generative models, with LLMs, there can be multimedia. So it can be voice, for example, it could be deepfake videos. So how would you address that?
So the quick answer to that would be to make sure that, again, whoever is providing you the training to your organization, for example, is including those type of samples and examples as part of their exercises, quite frankly, and that you are demanding or asking them about, hey, is this included? Why or why not?
Can I
Yes,
add
please.
to Megan's absolutely right. There's the privacy and policy standard. There were two parts to the question the gentleman asked. The first one is, do you see, I'm interpreting, by the way, are there other use cases other than phishing that AI, and specifically generative AI, can can you be used for? And the second thing is, what do you do to combat them? So yes, we have seen them. We have seen generative AI being used to actually write new forms of malcode, like PowerShell commands. So new types of threats, we have seen that. And two, the answer is it's not easy. The best way for us to deal with some of these things is a multi-layered defense capability. So for phishing, we're instituting a digital trust program using digital certificates and signatures and things like that. Every specific use case has a different type of technology to combat them, but it's not easy.
Okay, and then I would fall back on the NIST RMF for that too, as the risk-based context, right? Because there is really no technological way of combating deepfakes right now. So with that, please, thank you very much for attending, and I hope you have any questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you very much, our cybersecurity panel.